My name is Reese Mitchell, and I'm 34 years old. For 5 years, I was the senior project manager at Reynolds Tech, a job I poured my heart into, dedicated to the company's success. That Tuesday morning began like any other until Diana Reynolds, the CEO's wife, stormed into my office, her face a mask of fury. "You've disrespected me," she snarled, her manicured finger jabbing at me. "And now you will pay." Little did I know that her attempt to ruin my career would spectacularly backfire within hours. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I turned the tables on the woman who thought she owned the company. I didn't come from money or connections. My parents, Rachel and Thomas Mitchell, were hardworking, middle-class Americans who sacrificed everything to send me to college. I graduated from State University with a business administration degree and student loans that would take years to pay off. Unlike some of my classmates who landed easy jobs through family ties, I started at the bottom as an administrative assistant at a small tech firm. For 3 years, I worked longer hours than anyone else, volunteered for undesirable projects, and studied industry trends nightly. My big break came when I was hired as a junior project coordinator at Reynolds Tech, a mixed but growing company specializing in enterprise software solutions. The founder, William Reynolds, had built the company from scratch 30 years ago, and it was known as one of the few true meritocracies in the corporate world. When I joined, Marcus Reynolds, William's son, had just taken over as CEO. He was different from his father, more polished, Harvard Business School educated, and focused on rapid growth. Still, he seemed to respect hard work and results, which I consistently delivered. In my 5 years at Reynolds Tech, I climbed from junior coordinator to senior project manager, overseeing our most profitable client relationships. My team respected me because I never asked them to do anything I wouldn't do myself. We consistently exceeded our targets, generating millions in revenue. Catherine Barnes, the chief operations officer and one of the few female executives, took me under her wing early on. "Reese," she once told me over coffee, "you have the skills to reach the top, but watch out for the politics. Success makes people jealous, especially when it comes from someone they didn't expect to succeed." I had a good relationship with my direct supervisor, James Parker, the director of client services. James was technically brilliant but avoided conflict. He'd been with the company for 15 years and knew how to navigate corporate waters without making waves. While he acknowledged my contributions, he was also cautious about whose toes I might be stepping on with my rapid ascent. My closest ally was Stephanie Green, another project manager who started around the same time as me. We bonded over late nights preparing client presentations and dealing with the occasional sexist comment from older executives. Stephanie was more outspoken than me, which sometimes got her into trouble, but her loyalty was unwavering. Everything changed 2 years ago when Marcus married Diana Walker. Diana had been a marketing executive at a rival firm, though her actual accomplishments seemed vague when discussed. She was beautiful, charming when she needed to be, and had a knack for making herself the center of attention. After the marriage, subtle shifts began at Reynolds Tech. Long-standing employees were replaced with people from Diana's past connections. Company events became more lavish, focused more on impressing than team building. Marcus's open-door policy vanished. Access to the executive suite now required going through proper channels, which usually meant getting Diana's approval. Diana had no official position at Reynolds Tech, but she started appearing at executive meetings offering suggestions that somehow became policy. She referred to the company as "our company" despite having no actual role or responsibilities. The old guard, including Catherine, was increasingly sidelined. The culture that once valued results above all else began shifting towards one that valued loyalty to the Reynolds family, specifically loyalty to Diana. Those who played along received promotions and perks. Those who maintained their professional boundaries found themselves working on less prestigious projects or being passed over for advancement. I tried to stay out of the politics, focusing instead on delivering results for my clients. My team's success had so far insulated us from the worst of the changes. We brought in too much revenue to be directly attacked, and Marcus still seemed to appreciate the quarterly reports showing our consistent growth. Catherine had warned me that my position was becoming precarious. "Diana sees you as a threat," she said during one of our now rare lunch meetings. "You've built your reputation on competence rather than connections. That makes you dangerous in her eyes." I hadn't taken the warning seriously enough. I believed that as long as I continued to exceed expectations and maintain professional relationships, my position was secure. I was dedicated to Reynolds Tech, not just for my own career, but because I genuinely believed in what we were building. Many of our products helped small businesses compete in an increasingly consolidated market. I took pride in that. What I didn't fully appreciate was how quickly a toxic influence at the top could seep through an organization. The company culture that had once attracted the best talent in the industry was eroding, replaced by insecurity and political maneuvering. People who had previously collaborated now competed, afraid of losing their positions if they weren't seen as sufficiently loyal to the new regime. I hadn't realized how dangerous my situation had become until that fateful company party, the night that would eventually lead to Diana Reynolds storming into my office demanding my termination. Reynolds Tech's annual gala was traditionally held at the Grand Plaza Hotel, a five-star establishment downtown. This year's event was more extravagant than ever, with ice sculptures, a full orchestra, and celebrities hired to mingle with guests. The official purpose was to celebrate another successful year and thank employees for their contributions. But everyone knew it had evolved into Diana's showcase, her chance to play corporate royalty. I had been looking forward to the event because I would be presenting the results of the Miller account, a project that had increased client engagement by 48% and generated $4.2 million in additional revenue. It was the kind of success story Reynolds Tech had been built on. And despite the changing culture, I hoped it would remind everyone, especially Marcus, of what truly mattered to the company's bottom line. I arrived wearing a simple black dress, professional but elegant. Stephanie met me at the entrance, looking stunning in emerald green. "Ready to dazzle them with actual results?" she whispered as we checked our coats. Such a novel concept these days. The ballroom was transformed with thousands of white lights, crystal chandeliers, and elaborate floral arrangements. Executives from partner companies mingled with Reynolds Tech employees, everyone dressed to impress. I recognized the Miller team at a table near the presentation area and made a mental note to speak with them later. "There's Catherine," Stephanie nudged me, pointing toward our mentor who was speaking with William Reynolds, the company founder who now rarely made appearances. Old guard united. Catherine spotted us and discreetly waved us over. William Reynolds, now in his 70s but still sharp as ever, greeted us warmly. "Reese Mitchell," he said, shaking my hand. "Catherine tells me your team is responsible for keeping the Miller account from jumping ship to Anderson Solutions." "We worked hard on that one, sir," I replied, genuinely pleased that he knew about the project. "They needed customization that others weren't willing to provide. That's how we built this company." William nodded approvingly. Understanding what the client truly needs, not just what's easiest to sell them. Our conversation was interrupted by a sudden hush falling over the room. Marcus and Diana Reynolds had arrived, and as had become tradition, everyone was expected to acknowledge their entrance. Diana was wearing a designer gown that probably cost more than my monthly salary, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. As they made their way through the crowd, people stepped aside, offering compliments and deference. Diana basked in the attention, stopping to accept praise as though she were royalty receiving tribute from subjects. After the obligatory entrance parade, dinner was served. I was seated with my team, the Miller representatives, and several potential clients Marcus had asked me to speak with. The stakes were high. These prospects represented millions in potential business, and I was determined to make a good impression. I was deep in conversation with Jessica Winters, the procurement director for Northland Industries, when I sensed someone standing behind me. The people at my table had fallen silent, but I was explaining a technical integration point Jessica had specifically asked about, and I needed to finish my thought before losing her interest. "So the API allows your existing systems to communicate?" seamlessly with our platform without having to replace any of your current infrastructure. I concluded, pulling up a simple diagram on my tablet. That's the key difference between our solution and what others are offering. Jessica nodded, clearly impressed. That would save us considerable implementation costs. I wish your competitors had mentioned this capability. They probably don't. Have it? I smiled, then turned to include the rest of the table in the conversation and froze. Diana Reynolds was standing directly behind my chair, an expectant look on her face. From the expressions of my table mates, she had been there for at least a minute while I continued my explanation to Jessica. Mrs. Reynolds, I said, trying to recover quickly. I apologize. I didn't see you there. We were just discussing the Miller implementation. Diana's smile didn't reach her eyes. Clearly, your conversation was too important to be interrupted, even for the host of this event. I felt my face flush. Not at all. I was just finishing a technical point. How can I help you? I merely wanted to congratulate you on the Miller account, she said, her voice carrying just enough for nearby tables to hear. Though I would have expected someone in your position to be more aware of proper protocol and respect. Before I could respond, Stephanie jumped in. Reese's presentation on the Miller account is actually next on the program. She's generated millions for the company with this project. Diana's gaze flickered to Stephanie, then back to me. How fortunate for her, she said coolly. Perhaps success has made some people forget who runs this company. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving an uncomfortable silence at our table. Jessica Winters leaned toward me. Office politics, she murmured sympathetically. Every company has them. For what it's worth, I appreciate you finishing your explanation instead of dropping everything. Shows you prioritize clients. I managed to smile, but internally I was calculating the damage. Diana Reynolds had just publicly suggested I lacked respect for leadership, and in the current company climate, that was dangerous territory. When it was time for my presentation, I forced myself to focus on the facts and figures, the undeniable success of the project. Marcus seemed impressed, nodding along with my key points, but Diana sat beside him, whispering occasionally in his ear, her expression unreadable. After the formal presentations, as people mingled and the orchestra played, I overheard Diana speaking to Marcus in a secluded corner. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but her words carried clearly to where I was standing behind a large floral arrangement. That woman deliberately disrespected me, Diana was saying, in front of clients no less. She ignored me while I was standing. Right there. She was in the middle of a client discussion, Marcus responded, sounding tired. Reese is one of our top performers. The Miller account alone. I don't care what account she brought in, Diana cut him off. She needs to understand who's in charge here. Something needs to be done about that woman, Marcus. I'm serious. I quietly backed away, my stomach nodding. As I rejoined the party, Stephanie found me, concern written across her face. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said. Worse, I replied. I think I just heard Diana Reynolds put a target on my back. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur. I maintained my professional demeanor, continued conversations with clients, and even accepted congratulations from colleagues on my presentation. But the weight of Diana's words hung over me like a storm cloud, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. As Stephanie and I waited for our cars at the valet stand, Catherine joined us, her expression grave. Diana was making quite a scene about you after you left, she said without preamble, claiming you deliberately embarrassed her. That's ridiculous, Stephanie protested. Reese was doing her job, talking to prospects, Catherine nodded. I know that, and most people who matter know that too. But be careful, Reese. Document everything. Diana holds grudges, and she has. Marcus's ear. As my car arrived, Catherine squeezed my arm. This company still needs people like you, even if some have forgotten that. Watch your back, but don't back down. I drove home that night with a sense of foreboding. What should have been a triumphant evening celebrating my team's success had instead become the beginning of what would prove to be the most challenging period of my professional life. The Monday after the gala, I could feel the shift as soon as I walked into the office. Conversation stopped when I entered the break room. Colleagues who normally greeted me warmly suddenly became intensely interested in their phones or laptops when I approached. The few who did speak to me seemed nervous, their eyes darting around as if checking who might be watching. Stephanie cornered me by the coffee machine. "It's worse than we thought," she whispered. "Diana's been telling everyone you deliberately humiliated her at the gala. She's spinning it like you were making some power play." I shook my head in disbelief. That's absurd. I was literally doing my job talking to a prospect about technical specifications. "I know that, and anyone with half a brain knows it too," Stephanie said. "But Diana's version is the one getting traction with the executive team." Stephanie glanced around before continuing. "This isn't her first rodeo. Reese, Rebecca from accounting told me Diana did the same thing at her last husband's company. Anyone she saw as a threat would suddenly find themselves sidelined or fired over some manufactured offense."
Last husband's company? I repeated.
"I thought she worked in marketing at Tech Solutions." Stephanie raised an eyebrow. "That's the official story. Reality is, she was married to their CFO for about a year before meeting Marcus. There were rumors about financial irregularities, but everything got hushed up in the divorce settlement. This information cast Diana's hostility in an even more concerning light. I wasn't just dealing with an entitled executive spouse. I was dealing with someone who had a pattern of this behavior. Back at my desk, I found an email notifying me that my weekly meeting with James had been moved from our usual conference room to his office. When I arrived, he seemed uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact as he shuffled papers on his desk. "Everything okay, James?" I asked, taking a seat. Fine, he replied too quickly. "Just a busy morning. Look, about the Northland proposal, I think we should hand that off to Brandon's team." I stared at him in confusion. "Brandon's team?" "But Jessica Winters specifically requested to work with me after our conversation at the gala. I already started drafting the proposal." James fidgeted with his pen. "Strategic decision. Brandon has more experience with manufacturing clients." "Brandon has never worked with a manufacturing client," I pointed out. "His specialty is financial services." "James, what's really going on here?" He sighed, finally meeting my eyes. "There's been some concern about your workload. The feeling is that you should focus on maintaining existing accounts rather than developing new business for a while." The implication was clear. I was being sidelined. "This is about Diana Reynolds, isn't it?" James winced. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to," I replied, keeping my voice even despite my rising anger. "This is ridiculous, James. I brought in more new business last quarter than any other project manager. Northland could be a 7-figure account." "I know," he said quietly. "My hands are tied on this one, Reese. Just keep your head down for a while, okay? Focus on the Miller implementation. This will blow over." But it didn't blow over. The next 2 weeks, I was systematically excluded from meetings I would normally attend. Clients I had developed relationships with were reassigned to other project managers with flimsy explanations. My team members were pulled for special projects without my input or approval. Meanwhile, Diana's presence in the office increased dramatically. Prior to the gala, she had rarely appeared at headquarters, limiting her involvement to social events and the occasional executive lunch. Now she was there almost daily, often stationed in a glass-walled conference room with clear sightlines to my office. I could feel her watching me, evaluating every interaction, every phone call. Catherine tried to run interference when possible, assigning me to a critical internal project reviewing our client billing systems. "It's not as sexy as landing new accounts," she told me, "but it keeps you valuable and gives you access to information most people don't see." The project was tedious but necessary, reconciling billing records across our client base to ensure accuracy and compliance. I threw myself into it, grateful for meaningful work when so many of my normal responsibilities had been stripped away. It was during this review that I first noticed something odd. Several high-value clients had service agreements that had been modified in the past year, with additional consulting fees added to their contracts. The changes had all been authorized by Marcus, but the documentation was sparse, and the actual consulting deliverables were vaguely defined. Most concerning was that the fees were being directed to a vendor I didn't recognize, Phoenix Consulting Group. When I cross-referenced with our vendor database, Phoenix appeared to have been added recently, with Diana listed as the relationship manager. The amounts were significant, between $10,000 and $50,000 per client per quarter, and they seemed to be increasing over time. I mentioned the discrepancies to Stephanie over lunch outside the office. Her eyes widened. Phoenix Consulting? I've never heard of them doing any actual work for us. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? I shushed her, glancing around the restaurant. I'm not thinking anything yet. I'm just noting inconsistencies that need to be investigated. Be careful, Reese, Stephanie warned. If Diana is involved in something shady, and you start asking questions. I know, I nodded. That's why I'm being methodical. Catherine assigned me this audit for a reason. I'm just doing my job thoroughly. Back at the office, the campaign against me intensified. Files I needed went missing from the shared drive. Meetings were rescheduled without notifying me. Emails I sent went mysteriously unanswered. Then the incidents became more personal. My parking spot was reassigned to a visiting vendor. The administrative assistant who had supported my team for years was transferred to another department. My name was accidentally left off the list for the quarterly leadership dinner. Through it all, I maintained my professionalism, focusing on the billing audit and documenting every irregularity I found. Catherine had been right. Documentation was going to be my best defense. One evening, working late to catch up on the work I could no longer delegate, I discovered something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Phoenix Consulting Group wasn't just receiving fees from Reynolds Tech. It was registered to an address that matched a property recently purchased by Diana Reynolds, listed under her maiden name in public records. The next morning, as I was deciding how to proceed with this information, Diana Reynolds made her move, storming into my office with an ultimatum that would change everything. It was just after 9 in the morning when my office door flew open without a knock. Diana Reynolds stood in the doorway, dressed impeccably in a designer suit, her face contorted with barely controlled rage. Behind her, several employees hovered in the hallway, pretending to be engaged in conversation while obviously straining to hear what was happening. You just can't help yourself, can you? Diana spat, slamming the door behind her. I warned Marcus about you, but he insisted on giving you chances. I remained seated, forcing my expression to stay neutral despite my racing heart. Good morning, Mrs. Reynolds. Is there something I can help you with? Don't play innocent with me, she hissed, leaning over my desk. I know you've been accessing financial records that have nothing to do with your responsibilities, snooping into matters that don't concern you. So she knew about the audit. I took a deep breath before responding. I was assigned to review our billing procedures across all accounts. It's a standard compliance check that we perform periodically. You've been deliberately looking for ways to undermine me, Diana countered, her voice rising. Ever since the gala, you've been resentful of my position here. You can't stand that I have influence over this company while you're just an employee who can be replaced. I maintained eye contact, refusing to be intimidated. My only concern is doing my job effectively. Mrs. Reynolds, Reynolds Tech has been good to me, and I want what's best for the company. What's best for the company? She laughed bitterly. You have no idea what this company needs. Marcus and, I are taking Reynolds Tech to the next level, making connections you couldn't possibly understand. And yet, here you are, questioning decisions made at levels far above your pay grade. She straightened up, adjusting her jacket with manicured hands that trembled slightly. I've had enough. This ends today. Before I could respond, she yanked the door open and stalked down the hallway toward James's office. The employees who had been eavesdropping scattered like startled birds. But their eyes followed Diana and then turned to me with expressions ranging from pity to morbid curiosity. Stephanie appeared at my door seconds later. What the hell was that about? She whispered urgently. She knows I've been looking at the Phoenix Consulting payments, I replied quietly. And she's not happy about it. Oh God, Reese, this is bad. Stephanie glanced toward James's office where we could see Diana gesturing emphatically through the glass walls. She's going nuclear. I know. I quickly logged into my computer and sent myself an email with key documents attached. But I'm not going down without a fight. 15 minutes later, my desk phone rang. It was James's assistant, her voice unnaturally formal. Mr. Parker would like to see you in his office immediately. As I walked the gauntlet of curious stairs toward James's office, I held my head high. Diana was still there, standing beside James, who sat behind his desk looking like he might be physically ill. There was an empty chair clearly meant for me. I took it without being asked, placing my tablet on my lap and folding my hands calmly. On top of it, Reese, James began, his voice strained. Mrs. Reynolds has brought some serious concerns to my attention. There have been allegations of unauthorized investigations into company financial matters. Fire her, Diana interrupted. I don't want to hear excuses or explanations. Either she goes or I'll make your life a living hell, James. And Marcus will hear exactly how you failed to support his wife when she was being undermined by an insubordinate employee. James winced, then turned back to me with genuine regret in his eyes. Reese, I'm sorry, but before you continue, James, I smiled, the calm certainty of my position giving me strength. I think you should check your email. I sent you something about 20 minutes ago that you'll want to review before making any decisions. James frowned, glancing at his computer screen. This isn't the time for... It's exactly the time, I cut in, my voice firm but professional. Please just look at the email I sent you. Subject line, Phoenix Consulting Review, urgent. Reluctantly, James clicked on his mouse, opening the email. I watched as his eyes scanned the contents, then widened. The color drained from his face as he opened the attachment's copies of contracts. Bank transfers, corporate filings, and property records, all meticulously organized and annotated. What is it? Diana demanded, trying to see his screen. What? Has she sent you? James looked up at me, then at Diana, his expression a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. Mrs. Reynolds, I think we need to call Marcus and the legal team immediately. Why? Diana snapped. What has she told you? Whatever it is, she's lying. These are official company documents, James said quietly. And if what they suggest is true, we have a serious problem. Diana lunged for the computer, trying to see what had caused James's dramatic change, but he turned the screen away. I'll be calling security next if you don't step back, Mrs. Reynolds. For the first time since I'd met her, Diana Reynolds looked uncertain, her carefully constructed facade cracking to reveal the panic beneath. She turned to me, eyes blazing. What did you do? What are you accusing me of? I met her gaze steadily. I'm not accusing you of anything, Mrs. Reynolds. The documents speak for themselves. Phoenix Consulting Group has received over $2 million from Reynolds Tech in the past 18 months. Phoenix Consulting is registered to your personal property. There's no evidence that any actual consulting services were ever provided. Her face went white, then red with fury. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I replied calmly, I think I do. And so will everyone else once they see these records. The battle lines had been drawn. In that moment, we both knew that only one of us would survive this confrontation professionally. What Diana didn't realize was that I had been preparing for this moment since I first discovered the irregularities, and I had far more evidence than what I'd shown James so far. The conference room on the executive floor felt cavernous with just the four of us inside. James had called an emergency meeting with Marcus, myself, and Lavra Bennett, the Human Resources Director. Diana had been asked to wait in Marcus's office. Request she protested vehemently until Marcus himself insisted. I need you to explain exactly what you found, Marcus said, his normally confident demeanor replaced by tense concern. And how you found it. I connected my tablet to the presentation screen. 2 weeks ago, Catherine Barnes assigned me to conduct an internal audit of our client billing systems. It was a standard compliance review that we perform periodically. Why you? Marcus asked. That's usually handled by the finance team. James shifted uncomfortably. Catherine felt that Reese needed a project that would keep her valuable to the company while maintaining a lower profile. Understanding dawned on Marcus's face. Because of the situation with Diana. Yes, I confirmed. During this audit, I was cross-referencing contract terms with actual billing and noticed that several of our top-tier clients had amendments adding strategic consulting services provided by Phoenix Consulting Group. I displayed a series of contract amendments on the screen. These were all added within the last 18 months. The services described are vague strategic market positioning, competitive intelligence, executive relationship management, but the fees are substantial, ranging from $10,000 to $50,000 per quarter per client. Marcus leaned forward, studying the documents. I remember signing off on some consulting arrangements Diana recommended. She said these were important for strengthening client relationships. The issue, I continued carefully, is that there's no evidence that Phoenix Consulting Group provided any actual services. There are no deliverables, no reports, no meeting notes, nothing that would typically document consulting work. I clicked to the next slide. When I investigated further, I discovered that Phoenix Consulting Group was incorporated 17 months ago, shortly after you and Diana were married. The company has no website, no employees on record other than its registered agent, and no physical office. Marcus's face had grown increasingly pale. And the registered agent is, technically, it's a lawyer at Berkman and Associates. But the beneficial owner listed on the corporate filings is Diana Walker, Diana's maiden name. Lavra. The HR director gasped softly. Marcus closed his eyes briefly as if steeling himself. Go on. The payments to Phoenix are routed through 3 different banks before ending up in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I displayed the transaction records I had meticulously traced. In total, approximately $2.3 million has been diverted from Reynolds Tech to this account since Phoenix was established. How did you get access to these banking records? James asked, sounding both impressed and concerned. I didn't access any private banking information, I clarified. These are all Reynolds Tech financial records showing our payments to Phoenix. The routing information was included in the vendor setup documents that Diana herself filed with our accounting department. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. Is there more? I nodded reluctantly. Yes. Once I identified this pattern, I researched Diana's background more thoroughly. She wasn't a marketing executive at Tech Solutions as her resume states. She was married to their CFO, Harold Jenkins, for 14 months. During that time, a similar consulting company called Artemis Advisory was established, receiving payments from Tech Solutions clients. I displayed news articles and court records. After their divorce, Tech Solutions conducted an internal investigation and found approximately $1.8 million had been diverted. They pursued legal action but ultimately settled out of court with a non-disclosure agreement. The case was sealed, but I found references to it in public business journals. Before Tech Solutions, Diana worked at Westridge Financial for 11 months, I continued. Their CEO, Richard Thompson, was briefly engaged to her. After they broke up, Westridge disclosed a $900,000 loss due to what they called vendor fraud in their SEC filings, though no specific details were provided. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus had returned to his seat, looking shell-shocked. You're suggesting this is a pattern? The evidence suggests that Diana has done this at least twice before. I confirmed gently, setting up shell companies to divert funds from companies where she has influence through personal relationships. James cleared his throat. Reese, how long have you been gathering this information? I discovered the initial discrepancies during the audit 2 weeks ago, I explained. Once I realized what might be happening, I dedicated my evenings and weekends to compiling this evidence. I wanted to be absolutely certain before bringing such serious allegations forward. Why didn't you come to me immediately? Marcus asked, his voice strained. I met his gaze directly. With all due respect, Mr. Reynolds, Diana is your wife, and she has been actively trying to have me fired for weeks. I needed to ensure I had comprehensive evidence before presenting it, or I risked being dismissed before the investigation could be completed. Lavra nodded. She's right, Marcus. Given the circumstances, Reese took the appropriate steps. I've sent copies of all documentation to our legal counsel, Michael Davidson, I added. He should be reviewing it now. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door, and Michael entered, his expression grave. I've reviewed the initial documents, he confirmed. And I've spoken with our outside counsel. This is extremely serious, Marcus. If even half of what Reese has uncovered is accurate, we're looking at potential fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of company funds. Marcus stood again, straightening his shoulders with visible effort. We need to talk to Diana now. Before we do, Michael cautioned, you should know that I've already notified the board. As I'm legally obligated to do, William is on his way in. The mention of Marcus's father, the company founder, seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He nodded once, then turned to me. Thank you for your thoroughness, Reese. I can imagine how difficult this has been. As we prepared to confront Diana with the evidence, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for what this would mean. For Marcus and the company I had dedicated years to building. But beneath that sadness was a steely determination. The truth needed to come to light regardless of the personal cost to anyone involved. Diana had tried to destroy my career to protect her scheme. Now she would face the consequences of her actions, and Reynolds Tech would begin the difficult process of healing from her betrayal. The executive boardroom had never felt so tense. William Reynolds, the company founder, sat at the head of the table, his weathered hands clasped before. To his right was Marcus, looking like he had aged years in the past hour. Michael Davidson, our legal counsel, sat opposite me with a representative from our outside law firm beside him. Lavra from HR was there to document the proceedings, and James sat next to me, occasionally giving me reassuring glances. When Diana was escorted in by security, she had clearly been crying, but had pulled herself together enough to project indignation. What is this about? She demanded, stopping short when she saw William. Father Reynolds, I didn't know you were coming in today. William's expression remained impassive. Sit down, Diana. She took the only empty chair directly opposite Marcus. Someone needs to explain what's happening. Why was I kept waiting in Marcus's office for over an hour? Marcus looked to Michael, who nodded and took the lead. Mrs. Reynolds, serious allegations have been brought to our attention regarding financial improprieties involving Reynolds Tech funds. What improprieties? She asked, her voice steady, but her fingers nervously adjusting her bracelet. And what does this have to do with me? Michael gestured to me. Miss Mitchell uncovered the irregularities during a routine billing audit. She presented what she found. I tapped my tablet, and the presentation appeared on the large screen. Diana's eyes darted between the display and my face, narrowing as I methodically walked through the evidence again, the contracts, the payments, the shell company, and the pattern of similar behavior at her previous connections. When I finished, Diana laughed, the sound brittle and forced. This is absurd. Phoenix Consulting is a legitimate business providing valuable services to Reynolds Tech. Marcus approved everything. Based on your recommendation, Marcus said quietly. And your assurance that the services were essential. They were essential, Diana insisted. The relationships we built through Phoenix helped secure those accounts. What specific services did Phoenix provide? William asked, speaking for the first time since the presentation began. Because our review shows no deliverables, no reports, no documentation of any kind. Diana turned to him, clearly trying to establish a connection. The services were primarily relationship-based, William dinners, events, introductions to key decision-makers. The kind of high-level networking that doesn't always leave a paper trail but delivers results. $2.3 million worth of networking, William noted dryly, without a single email, meeting note, or report to show for it. This is a witch hunt, Diana declared, her composure cracking slightly. And we all know who's behind it. She glared at me. Reese has been jealous of my position from day one. She couldn't stand that I had influence she could never achieve as a mere employee. So she manufactured this conspiracy theory to discredit me. Diana, Marcus interjected. The corporate filings list you as the beneficial owner of Phoenix. The payments were routed to an offshore account you control. These aren't allegations. They're documented facts. Which proves nothing, Diana's voice rose. Yes, I own Phoenix. I established it to handle the consulting work I was already doing informally. There's nothing illegal about that. Except you never disclosed this conflict of interest, Michael pointed out. You arranged for Reynolds Tech to pay your company without revealing your ownership. That's fraud, Mrs. Reynolds. Diana's strategy shifted instantly. Her eyes filled with tears as she turned to Marcus. I was only trying to help the company. Maybe I made some mistakes in how I structured things. But my intentions were good. You know how hard I've worked to support you, to help you succeed? Marcus looked pained but resolute. If that were true, why hide your ownership of Phoenix? Why route the money through multiple banks to an offshore account? Why not simply take an official role with Reynolds Tech if you wanted to contribute? I didn't think the board would approve an official position, she admitted, her tone suggesting this was a reasonable concern. I knew people would say I only got the job because I'm your wife. This seemed cleaner. William Reynolds cleared his throat. $2.3 million cleaner. Diana's eyes hardened as she realized her emotional appeal wasn't working. She straightened in her chair, abandoning pretense. Fine, let's be practical about this. What happens now? Michael exchanged glances with the outside counsel before responding. Reynolds Tech will be requiring full restitution of all funds paid to Phoenix Consulting and any other entities you control. We'll need complete access to all relevant accounts and records. And if I refuse, Diana challenged, then the company will have no choice but to pursue criminal charges, Michael stated flatly. Wire fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of corporate funds carry significant penalties, including prison time. The color drained from Diana's face. You wouldn't dare! Think of the scandal, the damage to the company's reputation. The damage you've already done is far worse than any temporary public relations issue, William said, his voice carrying the weight of decades building the company. Reynolds Tech was founded on integrity and innovation. We've weathered recessions, market shifts, and aggressive competition. We'll survive this too. Diana turned to Marcus, her last hope. Are you going to let them do this? Let them threaten your wife, destroy our marriage over some bookkeeping discrepancies? For a moment, Marcus looked torn, the personal and professional aspects of the betrayal clearly warring within him. Then his expression hardened. This isn't about our marriage, Diana. This is about you systematically stealing from my family's company, from the people in this room, and hundreds of employees who trust us to act with integrity. I'm your wife, Diana hissed. Yes, Marcus agreed quietly, which makes this betrayal all the more painful. Seeing she was losing ground rapidly, Diana changed tactics again, turning to me with naked hatred. This is all your fault. You couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? Had to play the corporate hero, digging into things that weren't your business. It became my business when you tried to have me fired for doing my job, I replied evenly. Everything I uncovered was part of a legitimate audit that was assigned to me after you began your campaign against me. You disrespected me at the gala, Diana spat. Deliberately humiliated me in front of everyone. I shook my head. I was engaged in a business conversation with a prospective client. I didn't see you standing there. That's not disrespect. It's called being focused on my job. A job you won't have much longer, Diana threatened. When this is over, I'll make sure that's enough. William's authoritative voice cut through the room. Diana, you are no longer welcome on Reynolds Tech premises. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings from Marcus's office, and then you will leave. You can't ban me from the building. I'm a Reynolds. Diana protested. No, William corrected her. You're married to a Reynolds, and that status may well be changing soon given the circumstances. Marcus winced but didn't contradict his father. Diana stood abruptly, knocking her chair backward. You'll regret this, all of you. I have connections you can't imagine. Your previous connections ended with sealed court cases and non-disclosure agreements. I noted they didn't seem particularly helpful in the long run. Security had been summoned and now stood at the boardroom door. Diana glanced around the room one last time, her expression a mixture of fury and desperation. "This isn't over." "Actually," Michael interjected. "It is. We've already frozen the Phoenix accounts. We could identify and notify the relevant authorities. I suggest you retain legal counsel immediately, Mrs. Reynolds." As Diana was escorted out, the tension in the room eased slightly, though the weight of what had transpired remained. William turned to me, his expression somber but respectful. "Miss Mitchell, I want to personally thank you for your diligence and courage." Many would have looked the other way out of fear or self-preservation. "I care about this company, sir," I replied honestly. "The values it was built on matter to me." William nodded, then addressed the room. "We have difficult days ahead. There will be legal proceedings, financial recovery efforts, and inevitable questions from employees and clients. But Reynolds Tech has always thrived on transparency and accountability. We'll handle this the same way." After the meeting concluded, Marcus asked me to stay behind. When everyone else had left, he sank heavily into a chair, looking utterly exhausted. "I should have seen it," he said quietly. "All the signs were there." "She was very convincing," I offered, not knowing what else to say. He shook his head. "I was convinced because I wanted to be. The warning signs from her previous relationships, the lavish spending, her insistence on having access to company finances without an official role. I ignored it all because I didn't want to see the truth." "I'm truly sorry, Reese." Marcus looked up at me. "Don't be. You did exactly what you should have done. I'm the one who should apologize to you. Diana's campaign against you these past weeks. I allowed it to happen. I should have stepped in. You couldn't have known what she was really afraid of." I said. "No, but I knew she was targeting you unfairly," he admitted. "I told myself it was just office politics, not worth getting involved in. I was wrong." We sat in silence for a moment before Marcus spoke again. "My father thinks very highly of you, you know. He says you remind him of himself when he started. The company driven by principles, not just profit." "That's quite a compliment," I said, genuinely touched. Marcus nodded. "Reynolds Tech is going to need people like you more than ever as we recover from this. I hope you'll stay with us." "I'm not going anywhere," I assured him. As I left the executive floor, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also sadness for Marcus and concern for the company's future. The coming weeks would be challenging for everyone at Reynolds Tech, but at least now we could face those challenges honestly, without the shadow of corruption hanging over us. In the months following Diana's exposure, Reynolds Tech underwent a period of intense transformation. The legal proceedings against Diana moved forward swiftly, aided by the comprehensive evidence I had gathered. Rather than risk a public trial, she agreed to a settlement that required full restitution of the embezzled funds plus penalties. The non-disclosure agreement prevented us from discussing specifics, but the business community quickly learned that crossing Reynolds Tech would have serious consequences. Marcus took a brief leave of absence to deal with personal matters, including divorce proceedings. When he returned, he was different, humbled, but also more authentic. The carefully polished executive persona had been replaced by a more genuine leader who acknowledged mistakes and valued transparency. My role at Reynolds Tech evolved significantly. A week after Diana's departure, I was called to William Reynolds' office where he and Marcus offered me a newly created position, Vice President of Corporate Integrity. "We need someone who will ensure that this never happens again," William explained. "Someone who values ethics over expediency and isn't afraid to speak truth to power." The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, expanded responsibilities, and a seat at the executive table. More importantly, it represented a fundamental shift in the company's priorities, a recommitment to the values upon which Reynolds Tech had been built. My first initiative was implementing a comprehensive corporate governance program. We established clear protocols for financial oversight, conflict of interest disclosures, and whistleblower protections. Every vendor relationship was reviewed, every unusual payment scrutinized. It was exhaustive work but necessary to rebuild trust. Stephanie was promoted to lead my former team, bringing her characteristic straightforwardness to the role. "Just don't expect me to dodge bullets the way you did," she joked during our celebration dinner. "Some of us prefer a drama-free existence." James Parker struggled to find his footing in the new environment. His failure to protect me from Diana's vendetta had damaged his credibility, though I never blamed him personally. He had been caught in an impossible situation, torn between his direct report and the CEO's wife. Eventually, he requested a transfer to our West Coast office, seeking a fresh start away from the memories of the Diana era. The most significant change was in company culture. The toxic atmosphere of fear and favor trading that had developed under Diana's influence dissipated. Employees who had been sidelined for refusing to play politics were recognized and rewarded. Performance and integrity once again became the primary metrics for advancement. Catherine Barnes, who had wisely assigned me the audit that uncovered Diana's scheme, became my mentor as I adjusted to executive leadership. "I knew you were tenacious," she told me. "But even I didn't expect you to bring down a corporate embezzlement ring. That's overachieving even for you." 6 months after Diana's departure, William Reynolds announced his return as active chairman of the board. Though he had officially retired years earlier, he felt compelled to help restore the company's foundation. His presence brought stability and institutional memory that proved invaluable during the transition. At our first quarterly leadership retreat, William asked me to share my perspective on the events that had transpired. Standing before the company's top executives, I felt a responsibility to frame the experience constructively. "What happened with Diana Reynolds wasn't just about financial fraud," I told them. "It was about what happens when we allow fear to override our judgment. Fear of confrontation, fear of losing status, fear of challenging those in power. Every person who suspected something was wrong but stayed silent contributed to the problem." I paused, looking around the room, including me. I should have raised concerns earlier about the changing culture, the favoritism, the retaliation against those who wouldn't play along. We all have a responsibility to protect what makes this company special, and that means having difficult conversations when necessary. The response was a standing ovation led by William himself. It was a cathartic moment for the leadership team, an acknowledgement of collective failure, and a commitment to do better. On a personal level, the experience changed me profoundly. The woman who had trembled as Diana stormed into her office demanding her termination was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own worth and the importance of standing firm in her principles. I developed a reputation as tough but fair, someone who would listen to all perspectives but wouldn't be swayed by power or personality. My relationship with Marcus evolved into a respectful professional partnership. He never again allowed anyone's spouse, client, or board member to target an employee unfairly. The hard lessons he learned from Diana made him a more discerning and compassionate leader. 1 year after Diana's departure, Reynolds Tech was stronger than ever. Our financial performance had improved. Employee satisfaction scores were at an all-time high, and we were recognized by industry publications for our corporate governance practices. The crisis that could have destroyed the company instead became the catalyst for its renewal. On the anniversary of what we now called the Phoenix Incident, a gallows humor reference to Diana's fake consulting company Marcus stopped by my office. "I never properly thanked you," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You gave me a promotion and a raise," I reminded him. "That seemed pretty proper." He shook his head. "That was for the job you're doing now. I never thanked you for saving the company then, for having the courage to stand up when it would have been easier to back down." "I was just protecting my job," I demurred. "No," Marcus insisted. "You were protecting something much bigger than your job. You were protecting what Reynolds Tech stands for." The rest of us had lost sight of that. As he left, I reflected on how differently things might have turned out if I had yielded to intimidation. If I had accepted the unjust accusations, if I had prioritized keeping my head down over standing up for what was right. The lesson I carry forward wasn't about winning or defeating adversaries. It was about the quiet power of integrity, of doing what's right even when it's difficult, of documenting everything, of trusting that truth will eventually prevail. Diana Reynolds had seen me as an easy target, someone who could be bullied and discarded. She never realized that respect isn't demanded through intimidation, it's earned through character. For anyone facing similar challenges in their workplace, remember this: documentation is your shield, truth is your sword, and integrity is the ground you stand on. No amount of power or influence can overcome these forces in the long run. Sometimes you have to weather the storm to see the rainbow that follows. Have you ever stood up against workplace intimidation or exposed wrongdoing despite the risks? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might give someone else the courage they need to take a stand. And if you found this story valuable, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit from it. Thank you for listening, and remember, your integrity is worth protecting no matter what.